A Song in the Vineyard. Rebecca Morgan smoothed down her emerald bridesmaid dress for the 10th time that evening, her fingers trembling slightly as she gripped the microphone. The California sunset painted the vineyard in shades of amber and rose, and 200 wedding guests sat waiting for her to begin. Her college roommate Hannah was getting married, and Rebecca had promised to sing during the ceremony. Now, standing before this elegant crowd, she wondered if she should have just bought a nicer gift instead. The guitarist nodded at her, and Rebecca closed her eyes, letting the first notes of "A Thousand Years" flow from her lips. Her voice, rich and clear as honey, carried across the vineyard. She had spent 5 years teaching music to middle schoolers at Jefferson Academy, but singing still made her nervous. Teaching 12-year-olds to play recorders was one thing. Performing for a crowd of sophisticated guests at a luxury wedding was entirely different. As she sang the chorus, Rebecca finally opened her eyes and let her gaze sweep across the audience. That was when she noticed him. A tall man in an impeccably tailored navy suit stood near the back, completely still, watching her with an intensity that made her almost forget the next line. He had sandy brown hair, sharp features, and eyes that seemed to see right through her even from 30 feet away. The mysterious best man. The ceremony concluded with enthusiastic applause, and Rebecca quickly made her way toward the reception area, hoping to find some water and a quiet corner. Her heart was still racing, though she told herself it was just performance adrenaline. She had barely made it to the beverage table when a deep voice spoke behind her. That was extraordinary. Rebecca turned to find the man from the ceremony standing there, holding 2 glasses of champagne. Up close, he was even more striking, with a confident presence that somehow managed not to feel arrogant. He offered her one of the glasses. "Thank you," Rebecca said, accepting the champagne. "I'm glad I didn't mess up any of the words." "You did far more than not mess up." He smiled, and it transformed his serious face completely. "I'm Daniel Westbrook. I'm the best man, though right now I'm failing at my duties by talking to you instead of making sure the groom hasn't run away." Rebecca Morgan. "I'm the maid of honor and apparently the entertainment." She returned his smile. "And I saw the groom 5 minutes ago, so you're safe." Daniel laughed, a genuine sound that made something warm bloom in Rebecca's chest. They talked easily as the cocktail hour progressed, discovering shared interests in old movies and their mutual inability to keep houseplants alive. He asked about her teaching job with real curiosity, wanting to know about her students and what made her choose education. "Most people's eyes glaze over when I talk about teaching middle school," Rebecca admitted as they found seats at their assigned table for dinner. "They usually just say, 'That must be challenging,' and change the subject." "I imagine it's incredibly challenging," Daniel said. "But also rewarding in ways most jobs aren't. You're shaping how young people understand creativity and expression." Rebecca found herself studying him more closely. Daniel spoke like someone who thought deeply about things, who paid attention to details. Throughout dinner, he listened more than he talked, asking thoughtful questions that made her want to share more than she usually did with someone she'd just met. Dancing under the stars. When the dancing began, Rebecca performed 2 more songs for the newlyweds, including their first dance. As the final notes faded and other couples joined the bride and groom on the floor, she felt someone touch her elbow gently. "Would you dance with me?" Daniel asked. "Unless you're tired of music for the evening." "I'd love to," Rebecca heard herself say. He led her onto the dance floor with confidence, one hand finding hers while the other settled at her waist. Daniel moved with surprising grace, guiding her smoothly through the crowd of swaying couples. Rebecca was acutely aware of how perfectly her hand fit in his, how the subtle scent of his cologne made her want to move closer. "So, Daniel Westbrook," she said, looking up at him. "Hannah mentioned you were the groom's college friend. What do you do when you're not being an excellent best man?" "I work in technology," he said, a slight hesitation in his voice. "Software development and business management. It keeps me pretty busy." "Do you travel much?" More than I'd like, Daniel admitted. I'm based here in San Francisco, but I'm often in Seattle, Boston, sometimes internationally. It makes maintaining friendships difficult, which is why events like this matter so much. They danced through 3 songs, conversation flowing as easily as their movement across the floor. Rebecca learned that Daniel had grown up in Oregon, that he had a younger brother who worked as a marine biologist, and that he was terrible at cooking but excellent at finding the best restaurants in any city. I should probably go check on Hannah, Rebecca said reluctantly as the 3rd song ended. Maid of honor duties calling. Of course. Daniel released her hand slowly. Would it be all right if I found you later? I'm enjoying our conversation. I'd like that, Rebecca said, meaning it more than she'd meant anything in a long time. Underneath the California sky. The reception continued with toasts and cake cutting, but Rebecca found her attention constantly drifting to wherever Daniel was in the room. She caught him watching her several times, and each time their eyes met, she felt that same spark of connection. It was nearly 11 when she finally escaped the crowded reception hall for some fresh air. The vineyard's terrace overlooked rolling hills dotted with grapevines, now silver in the moonlight. She leaned against the stone railing, breathing in the cool night air. The view is spectacular. Rebecca wasn't surprised to find Daniel beside her. It felt almost inevitable, as if they'd been moving toward this quiet moment all evening. It really is, she agreed. Though I keep thinking about how my students would destroy this place in about 5 minutes. Daniel chuckled. You really love teaching, don't you? I do. Rebecca turned to face him. It's not glamorous, and the pay is awful, but watching a kid finally understand a concept, or seeing them perform something they've been working on for weeks, there's nothing else like it. That kind of passion is rare, Daniel said quietly. Most people just go through the motions. They talked for almost an hour on that terrace, sharing stories and dreams. Daniel told her about his vision for making technology more accessible, while Rebecca described her hope to eventually start a program bringing music education to underfunded schools. The conversation flowed with an ease that felt both thrilling and comfortable, like coming home to a place she'd never been before. I have to fly to Boston tomorrow morning, Daniel said finally, regret clear in his voice. Early meeting that I can't reschedule. Rebecca tried to hide her disappointment. Oh. Well, it was really nice meeting you. Rebecca. He pulled out his phone. Would you like to exchange numbers? I'd very much like to see you again when I'm back in town. Her heart leaped. Yes. I'd like that too. As they saved each other's contact information, the reception was winding down inside. Guests were beginning to leave, and Rebecca knew she'd need to help Hannah with final details. But standing there with Daniel under the California stars, she felt like something significant had shifted in her life. When they finally said goodnight, Daniel took her hand and squeezed it gently. I'll call you soon. I promise. Rebecca watched him walk back inside, already counting the days until she might see him again. She had gone to this wedding expecting nothing more than a chance to support her friend and maybe eat some good cake. Instead, she'd found something unexpected, something that felt like the beginning of a story she couldn't wait to continue, the phone call. 5 days passed before Rebecca's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She was in her classroom after school, organizing sheet music for next week's lessons when she saw the call coming through. Her heart jumped. Hello? Rebecca? It's Daniel. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. His voice sent a pleasant shiver through her. No, perfect timing actually. I just finished grading some quizzes. How was Boston? Long meetings and bad coffee, Daniel said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. But I kept thinking about our conversation at the wedding. About you, actually. They talked for 40 minutes, Rebecca sitting cross-legged on her classroom floor while Daniel described his week. He asked about her students, genuinely interested in the 7th grader who suddenly discovered she could sing alto, and the boy who kept trying to play heavy metal on the violin. "I'm back in San Francisco now," Daniel said as their conversation began to wind down. "Would you be free for dinner this Friday?" "I'd love that," Rebecca answered immediately. "Perfect. I'll pick you up at 7. And Rebecca? Dress casually. I promise this won't be anything too formal." The real Daniel Westbrook. Friday evening arrived with Rebecca changing her outfit 4 times before settling on dark jeans, a cream-colored sweater, and ankle boots. When Daniel knocked on her apartment door at exactly 7, he looked relaxed in jeans and a button-down shirt, his usual intensity softened by a genuine smile. "You look beautiful," he said, then handed her a small bouquet of wildflowers. "These reminded me of the vineyard." He took her to a small Italian restaurant in North Beach, the kind of place with red checkered tablecloths and Sinatra playing softly in the background. The owner, an elderly man named Giuseppe, greeted Daniel with a warm hug and knowing glances at Rebecca. "So you're a regular here?" Rebecca asked as they settled into their booth. "Giuseppe's family has owned this place for 60 years. Best pasta in the city, and he always saves me this corner table." Daniel poured them both wine from the bottle Giuseppe had brought without asking. "I wanted somewhere we could actually talk, not some loud, trendy place." Over plates of handmade ravioli and carbonara, they talked about everything. Rebecca shared stories about her childhood in Seattle, her parents who still lived there, and her sister who was studying veterinary medicine. Daniel described growing up in Portland with parents who encouraged curiosity and learning. "What made you get into technology?" Rebecca asked, twirling pasta on her fork. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I wanted to solve problems. I started coding when I was 13, building little programs for fun. In college, some friends and I created a software solution for small businesses. It grew from there." "That's impressive," Rebecca said. "Starting something from scratch like that." "It had its challenges." Daniel met her eyes. "Rebecca, there's something I should probably tell you about my work. About the company I mentioned." Something in his tone made her set down her fork. "Okay. The software company my friends and I started? It's called Westbrook Technologies. We developed cloud-based business management systems, and we've grown fairly significantly over the past decade. We went public 5 years ago." Rebecca's mind raced. Westbrook Technologies. She'd heard that name before, seen it in business news. Wait. Westbrook Technologies. That company is enormous. "Daniel, aren't you? Worth quite a bit of money, yes." He looked uncomfortable. "I'm the CEO. The company's valued at around $8 billion. The restaurant suddenly felt very small. Rebecca took a long sip of her wine, processing. This man across from her, who listened so carefully when she talked about her students, who brought her wildflowers and took her to a family-owned Italian restaurant, was a billionaire. Navigating new territory. "Why didn't you tell me at the wedding?" Rebecca asked finally. "Because when people know up front, it changes everything," Daniel said quietly. "They either get intimidated and pull away, or they get interested for all the wrong reasons. With you, I could just be Daniel. Not the CEO, not the guy from magazine covers, just a man having a conversation with a woman who captivated him." "I captivated you?" Rebecca couldn't help smiling a little. "Completely." His gray eyes were serious. "Your voice was beautiful, but it was watching you with your friend Hannah, the way you helped her throughout the evening, how you talked about your students with such genuine care. That's what captivated me." They finished dinner in a mix of comfortable conversation and new awareness. Daniel insisted on paying, which felt different now that Rebecca understood the scale of his resources. As they walked through the neighborhood afterward, she tried to reconcile the thoughtful man beside her with the business titan she'd read about in news articles. "This doesn't change anything for me," Daniel said as they strolled past shop windows. I'm still the same person you danced with at the wedding. I know, Rebecca said. It's just a lot to take in. I teach music to 12-year-olds. I have student loans and a 20-year-old car. Your world is so different from mine. Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. My bank account doesn't define who I am. And your job isn't what made me want to see you again. It was you, Rebecca. Just you. The sincerity in his voice melted some of her uncertainty. When he drove her home that night, she invited him up for coffee. They sat on her modest apartment sofa, talking until past midnight, and when he finally kissed her goodnight at her door, it felt like a promise of something real. Building something real. Over the next 2 months, Rebecca and Daniel settled into a relationship that worked around his demanding schedule. He traveled frequently to New York, Austin, and Seattle for business, but he called her every day, sometimes twice. They'd talk while she graded papers or while he sat in airport lounges waiting for flights. When he was in San Francisco, they spent as much time together as possible. Daniel took her to hole-in-the-wall restaurants and hidden parks, always choosing intimate settings over flashy venues. He came to her classroom one afternoon and sat in the back, watching her teach a lesson on musical notation, afterward telling her she was a natural. Rebecca met his younger brother Trevor during a weekend trip to the Monterey Aquarium, finding him warm and funny, clearly protective of Daniel. She introduced Daniel to her close friends, including Hannah, who gave Rebecca enthusiastic approval despite initial intimidation. He looks at you like you're the only person in the room, Hannah told her over lunch one day. Rich or not, that's rare. But the distance remained challenging. Daniel would be home for 5 days, then gone for 10. Hong Kong, London, Toronto. Rebecca understood his responsibilities, but she missed him when he was away. Video calls weren't the same as having him there. I wish I could come with you sometimes, Rebecca said one night over video chat. Daniel was in his hotel room in Singapore, she was curled up in bed in San Francisco. I wish you could too, he said. But I know your school schedule makes that nearly impossible during the year. Summer's coming, Rebecca offered. Maybe I could visit you somewhere then? I'd love that. Daniel smiled at the camera. We could go anywhere you want. Paris? Tokyo? Or we could just stay here and I'll show you all my favorite spots in the city. The turning point. 3 months into their relationship, Daniel took Rebecca to his penthouse for the first time. Located in a building overlooking the bay, the space was stunning but impersonal. Expensive furniture, modern art on the walls, but no photographs, no books, nothing that spoke of the man who lived there. This is where you stay when you're in town? Rebecca asked, running her hand along the marble kitchen counter. It's where I keep my clothes, Daniel said wryly. I've never thought of it as home. Just a place to sleep between trips. Rebecca wandered through the rooms, noting the unlived-in quality. The guest bedrooms looked like they'd never been used. The home office was the only space with any personality, filled with whiteboards covered in diagrams and shelves of technology books. Don't you get lonely? She asked, finding him standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. Daniel didn't answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. I've been lonely for years, Rebecca. Building the company required sacrifices. Relationships, stability, any sense of home. I told myself it was worth it, that once we reached certain milestones, I'd slow down. But there's always another milestone, another goal. Rebecca moved to stand beside him. And now? Now I've met someone who makes me question whether those sacrifices were necessary at all. He turned to look at her. You make me want things I'd stopped letting myself want. A real home. Someone to come back to. A life that's about more than just the next deal or expansion. They stood together in silence, watching the city lights shimmer. Rebecca leaned against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and wondered if they could really bridge the gap between their vastly different worlds. Meeting the families. A month later, Daniel flew with Rebecca to Seattle to meet her parents. Her father, a high school history teacher, and her mother, a librarian, welcomed Daniel warmly but with obvious curiosity about his background. Over a casual dinner at their suburban home, Daniel won them over by asking her father about his research on the Civil War and discussing books with her mother. "He's different than I expected," Rebecca's mother said later, helping her daughter with dishes while Daniel and her father talked on the back porch. "Very down to earth for someone so successful." "That's what I thought too," Rebecca admitted. "He doesn't act like his money defines him." "But it's still there," her mother said gently. "Sweetheart, I can see you care about him deeply. Just make sure you're building something that works for both of you, not just for him." The following month, Daniel took Rebecca to Portland to meet his parents. His father, a retired professor, and his mother, an artist, lived in a comfortable craftsman home filled with books and paintings. They embraced Rebecca warmly, clearly delighted to see their usually serious son so obviously happy. "Daniel hasn't brought anyone home in 6 years," his mother confided to Rebecca while showing her the garden. "After his company took off, he became so focused on work. We worried he'd forgotten how to let people in." The decision. 5 months into their relationship, the strain of Daniel's travel schedule was taking its toll. He'd been gone for 3 weeks, moving between Shanghai, Mumbai, and Dubai for a series of critical meetings. Rebecca threw herself into end-of-year activities with her students, but she felt his absence like a physical ache. When Daniel finally returned on a rainy Thursday evening, he came straight to her apartment from the airport, looking exhausted. Rebecca opened the door to find him standing there with dark circles under his eyes, his suit rumpled from the long flight. "Hi," he said simply. She pulled him inside, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight without speaking. They stood in her entryway for a long moment, just breathing together. "I can't keep doing this," Daniel said finally, his voice rough. Rebecca's heart plummeted. "What do you mean?" He pulled back to look at her. "I can't keep leaving you. I can't keep living out of hotels and spending more time on airplanes than with the person I love." "Yes, Rebecca. I love you. I should have said it before I left, but I'm saying it now. I love you too," she whispered, tears forming. "But Daniel, your company needs you. I knew what I was signing up for." "No." He shook his head firmly. "You didn't sign up to be alone half the time. And I didn't build this company just to be its slave. I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I've made some decisions." Over the next hour, Daniel explained the restructuring he'd been planning. He was promoting his longtime COO, Jennifer Palmer, to President of Operations. He was delegating more responsibilities to his executive team and cutting his travel schedule by 70%. "I'll still need to take important meetings and make key decisions," Daniel said. "But I'm done being on the road constantly. I want a life, Rebecca. I want a life with you. A new chapter." The changes didn't happen overnight, but over the next 2 months, Rebecca watched Daniel transform his role in the company. He set boundaries, delegated effectively, and started saying no to commitments that would take him away unnecessarily. When he did travel, he was gone for days instead of weeks. They fell into new routines. Daniel started joining Rebecca for her morning runs around the neighborhood. She helped him turn his sterile penthouse into an actual home, adding photographs, comfortable furniture, and personality. He attended her school's spring concert, sitting in the audience beaming with pride as her students performed. One Saturday, they volunteered together at a community center that offered free music lessons to underprivileged children. Watching Daniel patiently help a shy 8-year-old learn basic piano, Rebecca felt something click into place. This was who they were together, not defined by his wealth but by their shared values. "I've been thinking," Daniel said that evening as they cooked dinner together in his now homey kitchen. "About what you said months ago, about wanting to start a program for music education in underfunded schools. "That was just a dream," Rebecca said, chopping vegetables. "Something I'd like to do someday when I win the lottery." "What if someday could be now?" Daniel turned from the stove to face her. "I want to start a foundation, Rebecca. The Westbrook Foundation for Arts Education. And I want you to run it." Rebecca nearly dropped her knife. "Daniel, I can't run a foundation. I teach middle school music." "Exactly. You understand what these kids need because you work with them every day. You know the challenges schools face, what resources would actually make a difference." He moved closer. "You could still teach part-time if you wanted, but this could let you help hundreds or thousands of students instead of just the ones in your classroom." The idea was overwhelming and thrilling. Over the next weeks, they worked with lawyers and education consultants to structure the foundation. Rebecca would transition to teaching 3 days a week while dedicating the other 2 to foundation work. They'd start with schools in the Bay Area, providing instruments, funding music teachers, and creating after-school programs. The question. 6 months after they'd met at Hannah's wedding, Daniel took Rebecca back to the vineyard where it all began. The owner had arranged for them to have a private dinner among the grapevines, the summer sunset painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "This is where I first saw you," Daniel said as they walked between rows of vines after dinner. "You were standing in front of all those people, so nervous your hands were shaking, but then you opened your mouth and everyone just stopped. Including me." "I was terrified," Rebecca admitted. "I almost backed out completely." "I'm glad you didn't." Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. "Rebecca, before I met you, I was successful but empty. I'd achieved everything I set out to accomplish professionally, but I'd forgotten what any of it was for. You reminded me that life is about more than achievements and acquisitions. It's about connection, purpose, making a real difference." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, dropping to one knee right there between the grapevines. "You've changed everything for me. You've made me want to build a real home, to be present, to use what I have to help others. I don't want to spend another day without you in my life." He opened the box to reveal a simple but stunning sapphire ring. "Rebecca Morgan, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Rebecca's face as she nodded. "Yes. Absolutely yes." Daniel stood and slipped the ring on her finger, then kissed her as the sun set over the vineyard where their story had begun. Building their future. They married 4 months later in an intimate ceremony at the same vineyard, with just 50 close friends and family. Rebecca wore a simple ivory dress and carried wildflowers. Daniel's brother served as best man, and Hannah was Rebecca's maid of honor, crying through the entire ceremony. This time, it was Daniel who arranged for music. He'd hired a small orchestra, and they played as Rebecca walked down the aisle. But for their first dance, she sang to him, a song she'd written herself about unexpected love and finding home in another person. "I fell in love with your voice first," Daniel whispered as they swayed together. "But I fell in love with your heart forever." They honeymooned in Italy, spending 3 weeks exploring small villages and eating incredible food. Daniel had wanted to book luxury hotels, but Rebecca convinced him to stay in family-run bed and breakfasts where they could really experience local life. It was perfect. When they returned to San Francisco, they moved into a beautiful Victorian house in Pacific Heights that they'd renovated together. It had a music room for Rebecca with a grand piano and excellent acoustics, a home office for Daniel, and plenty of space for the family they hoped to have someday. The Westbrook Foundation for Arts Education officially launched that fall. Their first initiative provided instruments and music teachers to 15 underfunded schools across the Bay Area. Rebecca split her time between teaching at Jefferson Academy 3 days a week and running the foundation, finding deep fulfillment in both roles. Daniel continued leading Westbrook Technologies but with better balance. He was home for dinner most nights. He attended Rebecca's school concerts and foundation events. When he did need to travel, Rebecca sometimes joined him, and they'd extend business trips into mini-adventures. Full circle. A year after their wedding, Hannah asked Rebecca to sing at her sister's wedding. Standing in another elegant venue, microphone in hand, Rebecca thought about how much had changed since she'd sung at Hannah's ceremony. She'd been alone then, uncertain about her future, content but wondering if there was something more. Now she looked out at the audience and found Daniel sitting in the front row, watching her with the same intensity he'd had that first night. Beside him was an empty seat, his jacket draped over it, saving her a place for after she finished singing. She caught his eye and smiled before beginning the song. As her voice filled the room, Rebecca thought about all the unexpected turns life could take. How a single performance could lead to a conversation, which could lead to a connection, which could lead to love. After the ceremony, Daniel met her as she stepped off the stage, just as he had that first night. "Beautiful as always," he said, offering his arm. "Thank you," Rebecca said, taking it. "Though I think I prefer being on the other side of the wedding party now." "No regrets?" Daniel asked as they walked toward the reception together. Rebecca looked up at the man who'd changed her entire world, who supported her dreams while pursuing his own, who'd proven that love could bridge any gap if both people were willing to meet in the middle. "Not a single one," she said, and meant it with her whole heart. Together, they'd built something neither had expected but both had needed. A real home. A shared purpose. A love that had started with a song and grown into a symphony. And this, Rebecca knew, was just the beginning of their story.